A single dad helps a mysterious woman in an alley, only to discover she's a real estate titan, and together, they quietly build something deeper than shelter, a home. Now, before we begin, if you believe in healing, in chosen families, and the quiet magic of kindness, subscribe and let's walk this path together. Snowflakes swirled like drifting ash beneath the street lamp's glow, turning the alley into a blur of silence and pale gold. A rusted dumpster steamed faintly in the bitter cold, its shadow long against the brick wall, just enough to hide someone crumpled beside it. Jack didn't see her at first. His headlights caught only the glint of shattered glass and a gloved hand barely moving. He'd been heading home. Same route he always took after late shifts. Greystone Diner to Maple Street, with a gas station detour, if the tank sighed low. He almost didn't stop. Almost told himself she was just sleeping, just another bundle form in the city's margins. But then Sophie stirred in the back seat, soft voice cutting to the hum of tires. "Daddy, that lady's cold." So he stopped. He left the engine running, door open, one hand on the pocket knife, clipped to his hip. He approached carefully, boots crunching salt into the curb. She didn't lift her head, not until he said, "Ma'am?" Gentle, but edged with readiness. She flinched, as if the word hurt. "Are you all right?" A pause, then a voice that sounded more like memory than presence. "I think I need a minute." She was bruised along her jaw, her cheekbone blooming purple like a winter plum. Her purse was missing, one shoe broken at the arch. The heel snapped clean, but what caught Jack's breath was her expression, somewhere between fury and silence. Not fear, not despair, just restraint. "Can you stand?" "I don't know." Her hands trembled in her lap, nails chipped, palm scraped. Jack hesitated, thought of his daughter in the back seat, thought of the freezing air, thought of all the ways a good deed could be punished these days. Then Sophie called out again, "She can sit in my blanket, Daddy." That settled it. He helped her gently, one hand beneath her arm, the other supporting her elbow. She winced but didn't speak, biting down whatever she didn't want seen. She smelled faintly of something expensive on the blood and concrete. Fig and cardamom. Maybe. Something warm, wildly out of place in the alley. In the car, Sophie had pulled off her coat and spread it over the middle seat. The woman slid in slowly, gingerly, lips tight. "What's your name?" Sophie asked softly. The woman answered, "Elle." Just that. No last name. No follow-up. Jack pulled back onto the road, his hand steady on the wheel. The heater groaned warm air through cracked vents. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Then Elle's voice, quieter now. "Thank you." Jack nodded once, eyes on the wet sheen of the road ahead. "You hurt?" "Only my pride." "Someone did this?" Her pause was answer enough. "I've got a first aid kit at home," he said. "I don't want to intrude." "You already are," he said, not unkindly. "Might as well sit somewhere warm." She almost smiled. Almost. The house was a modest two-bedroom at the edge of town, sagging slightly to one side, like it had taken a punch it never quite recovered from. The porch light flickered, then steadied. Sophie skipped ahead, clutching her sketch pad to her chest. Inside, the air smelled of old wood and toast. Jack turned on a lamp, low and warm. Elle stood just inside the doorway, uncertain. "You can sit," he said, motioning toward the faded couch. "There's tea if you want it." She sat, slow, spine straight. Her fingers clutched her elbows. Jack brought her a mug. No sugar, no milk. She accepted it like something sacred. Sophie disappeared into her room, trailing whispers and the sound of crayons. Jack cleaned the cut on Elle's cheek. She didn't flinch, though her eyes stayed locked on his face like she was waiting for him to ask something he hadn't yet. He didn't. Instead, "Got a name?" "You already know what I'm called." "No, I mean someone I could call for you. Someone who'll miss you." A beat, then a slow, simple, "Not tonight." So he said nothing more. He handed her a blanket. gestured toward the bedroom. "You can take the bed. I'll take the chair." "I don't need." "It's not a kindness," he interrupted. "It's warmth. There's a difference." That time, she smiled, just briefly, then nodded and rose. Jack watched her fingers trail along the photo frame on the shelf beside the hallway. A picture of a woman, laughing, her arm wrapped around a younger Jack, their smiles bright, golden hour warm frozen in time. Elle didn't ask. Jack didn't explain. He slept with his feet up, one arm draped over his chest, dreaming lightly. The house creaked around him. Wind pressed against the windows like a sigh. In the morning, the scent of coffee pulled him from sleep. He sat up slow. Elle was in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of his old flannel shirts. She was slicing apples with a paring knife, moving like she'd always belonged there. Sophie was already at the table, swinging her legs and humming a song from kindergarten. "Morning," Elle said, her voice rasping gently. Jack cleared his throat. "Morning." They ate quietly. Apples, toast coffee. No questions. The kind of silence that felt earned. After breakfast, Elle reached the sponge and dish soap. "You don't have to," Jack began. "I know." And yet she did. Later that day, Jack dropped Sophie at school. Elle rode with him in the truck, the heater wheezing. They didn't speak much, but when he pulled up in front of the diner, she said, "Do you want me to wait here?" He shook his head. "You can take the truck if you need it. I'll walk back." She looked at him, truly looked, as if measuring something unspoken. "I'll be here," she said. And she was. When he stepped out of the diner at dusk, hair damp from steam, hands red from the dishwater, she was leaning against the truck's passenger door, holding 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. She handed him one without a word. It became a rhythm. The next day, she helped Sophie with homework. The next, she folded laundry. The day after, she fixed the loose hinge on the bathroom cabinet. "Do you always stay where you're not expected?" Jack asked once. "Only when I don't want to leave," she answered, almost without thinking. He didn't know what she meant. Not then. One night, he came home to find a sticky note on the fridge. "Need to clear my head. Will be back. Please keep the light on." No name, no signature, just a weight of quiet trust. He waited. Hours passed. Sophie fell asleep on the couch with her coloring book in her lap. Jack stood by the window, watching the snow return. He didn't pace, just stood, still and waiting. She returned just before midnight, her hair damp, her cheeks flushed. He opened the door before she knocked. She held up a paper bag. "I brought dinner. It's cold, but it's good." He didn't ask where she'd gone. She didn't explain. They ate in silence. Later, when Sophie stirred in her sleep, Elle covered her with a blanket and brushed her hair off her face. Jack saw her hand shake just slightly as she did. "You okay?" "I wasn't, but now I might be." That night, she placed a note in the tin by the fridge. Jack didn't read it. Not yet, but he felt something shift. Not loudly, not even clearly. Just a quiet turning, like a seed under snow beginning, at last, to wake. And somewhere in the hush between hours, he started to wonder not who she was, but who she had been before she had to hide it. That was how it began. Not with a rescue, not with a secret. Just a girl in an alley, a father in a truck, and a silence that said more than any words ever could. The mornings came quietly. Snow melted in patches along the gutter, revealing old leaves, bottle caps, and the muddy veins of sidewalk cracks. Jack would rise before dawn, his footsteps soft so as not to wake the house, though he suspected Elle had already been awake for hours. He'd find her sometimes at the kitchen table, a cup of tea steaming between her palms, the window cracked slightly open, like she couldn't quite trust the silence unless the world was breathing through it. She never asked for anything, never offered too much, but she stayed. At first, Jack told himself it was temporary. She was healing. She needed a place to land. And he had space, not much, but enough. and Sophie liked her. That alone held weight, but temporary as a way of stretching. One Tuesday morning, Jack found a folded note by the coffee pot. Just a simple list. Eggs, apples, milk, forgiveness. Just checking if you're reading to the end. He chuckled once, shook his head, and slipped it into the old biscuit tin on top of the fridge. A week later, there were 4 more. Some were lists. Some were stray thoughts. One was a poem about toast. They didn't feel like messages. They felt like company. Sophie had begun drawing pictures of the 3 of them together. Crayon sketches taped to the fridge. One showed Elle reading a book while Sophie leaned against her. Another had Jack cooking eggs while they all sat at a table. Sun pouring through the window. In one drawing, there was a 4th figure, a dog, smiling. They didn't have a dog, but no one corrected her. Jack started noticing the things Elle fixed without mention. The crooked cabinet hinge, the slow drip under the sink, the curtain rod that never quite held straight. She moved through the house like she was borrowing time, but tending to it all the same. Her presence was quiet, but persistent, like steam rising from morning tea. Still, she kept her past buttoned up tight. Jack didn't pry, but now and then something slipped, like when they walked Sophie to school, and Elle paused outside the old city hall, eyes tracing the stonework. "I used to think those windows looked like cathedral glass," she murmured. "Turns out they're just plastic. I was furious when I found out." And then, just like that, she'd changed the subject, as if the memory itself had stepped too close. Later that week, Jack brought her along to the diner. It was a shift day, just a stop-in for pie and coffee, a thank you from the manager for filling in last minute 2 nights ago. Elle stayed quiet until the cook, Miguel, cursed about the back layout again. "You're wasting motion," Elle said, not looking up from her cup. Miguel blinked. "What?" "Your prep station's wrong. You're walking 4 extra feet between the fridge and stove. That's hours a week. 1,000 a year. Rearrange the order. Fridge, counter, stove, sink. You'll see." Jack studied her as she kept her gaze low, face half in shadow. He said nothing, but a question flickered behind his eyes. That night, he found her sitting on the porch steps, barefoot, arms wrapped around her knees. The porch light above flickered, then steadied. Wind tousled her hair. He joined her without speaking. After a while, she whispered, "I used to design kitchens. Before the paperwork, before the boardrooms. That's how I started. With spaces. With flow." Jack didn't look at her, just nodded once. "Why'd you stop?" he asked. Her answer came after a long pause. "I forgot what they were for." The next morning, Jack found another note in the tin. A good kitchen is a conversation between motion and purpose. I think that's what I lost, purpose. He kept that one. One Thursday, she didn't come home. She had walked Sophie to school. Said she needed air. Jack didn't ask questions. He had work, and the truck was low on gas, and things like this happened. But when noon passed, then 3, then 5, he paced. She wasn't answering her phone. He didn't even know if it had a signal anymore. It was an old flip model she barely used. And by 6:30, with dinner burning and Sophie asking for the 5th time where she was, Jack felt the weight settle into his bones. He didn't want to think she was gone, but he also didn't want to admit how much that thought had carved a hollow in his chest. When the door finally opened, 7:45, Elle stood there with her coat damp from sleet, hair wind-blown, eyes tired. But she was holding something. A folder. Real estate documents. Color prints. A site map with lot numbers. She didn't say anything, just looked at him. Jack opened his mouth, closed it, then simply said, "Soup's still warm." She nodded. They ate without speaking. Sophie told a story about her art class. Elle listened with both hands wrapped around her bowl. Jack watched the steam rise between them and wondered how you ask someone why they're keeping a storm inside. When Sophie had gone to bed, Jack stayed behind, flipping to the folder Elle had left on the counter. There was a zoning map, a purchase agreement, tax evaluations, and a letter. One line stood out. Property transfer contingent upon reinvestment plan approval. He put the folder back down. Quietly. That night, Elle didn't come out of the bedroom. The next day, Jack walked her halfway to town. The wind had softened, but the air still bit through sleeves. They walked in silence. He didn't offer his arm, and she didn't ask for it. When they reached the corner where she usually turned, he stopped. "You're buying the block?" he asked softly. She stopped too. Didn't look at him. Just stared at the sidewalk. "Yes." "Before the alley, was that what you were doing?" "Scouting." "No," she sighed. "Before the alley, I was trying to forget why I started coming here in the first place." Jack exhaled slowly. "Why here?" "My mother used to live 2 streets over. We lost the house when I was 15. Another pause. She died the following year. I left after that. But it stayed in me." He didn't answer. She turned then, facing him fully. Her eyes were different now. Less guarded. More storm. "I came back to buy what they took from her. Piece by piece. But then I landed in your truck. And I forgot how to keep that part of myself cold." Jack studied her for a long time. "I have a daughter," he said at last. "And I let a stranger into my home because I believed she needed help." "She did." He nodded. "But that stranger also owns my neighborhood." "I never lied," she whispered. "No, but you didn't trust me with the truth." And with that, he turned and walked back the way they came. She didn't follow. That evening, Jack found a new note inside the tin. Folded, not sealed. Written neatly. "I wanted to matter to something that didn't have a price. I didn't mean to stay. But I did. And I didn't mean to care. But I do." The note smelled faintly of rain. He didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, she was gone. The bedroom was empty. Closet cleared. No note this time. No shoes left behind. Not even a forgotten teacup. In the sink. Just a tin, still on the fridge. And something else, tucked inside one of Sophie's crayon drawings on the table. A folded deed. Jack stared at it for a long time. His name on the house. Transferred. Signed. The date was yesterday. He didn't know what to feel. Relief. Fury. Gratitude. Grief. It mixed into something wordless and heavy and strangely still. When Sophie asked where Elle had gone, Jack only said, "She had to do something important." The girl nodded, quietly drawing another picture. This one of a house. A porch. A dog again. Smiling. And 3 figures. Still. Waiting. Rain returned with spring. Not the violent kind, but the gentle, soaking kind that lingers on window panes and pools and footprints left on porch steps. Jack began to leave his boots outside again. The air softened. Trees in the neighborhood budded with hesitant green, and everything smelled like thawed soil and beginnings. Inside the house, things settled into a strange new rhythm. Jack got up before dawn, packed Sophie's lunch, filled a coffee pot. He still reached for the extra mug some mornings before remembering she was gone. The tin on the fridge remained, heavier now, though no new notes had appeared. But he'd started adding his own. Scraps of paper, receipts, even the corner of a brown paper bag. They weren't letters, not really, just thoughts. The porch light's been fixed. I still leave it on. Sophie says her art teacher looks like you, but with worse hair. I think you like the new bird that visits the window. He didn't know if Elle would ever read them, but he wrote them anyway. The house felt less hollow than he expected. Maybe because she hadn't vanished in anger or cruelty, but in an unfinished sentence. It left space. And Jack, for all his practicality, had always been someone who paid attention to the silences between words. One afternoon, as the sun cracked through the cloud bank, he found Sophie out in the yard digging beside the porch steps with a kitchen spoon. "What ya doing?" "Planting something," she said. "We don't have seeds. I'm planting anyway." Maybe the ground remembers what you grow. He didn't argue. He knelt beside her and helped shape the dirt. In town, whispers began to stir. The for sale signs on the block were coming down, not with buyers, but with bold, clean paintwork and fresh windows. Someone was investing in a place the city had forgotten. Jack didn't connect it at first, not until he passed a lot beside the diner, once a gravel patch full of weeds, and saw the bright placard, Future Site of Willow Commons, Affordable Housing with Purpose. Project Lead, E. Marlowe. He stared at the name for a long time. Marlowe. Elle. He called Miguel from the diner's payphone. You know this? Jack asked. Yeah, man. Some suit came through last week with plans, proposals. All that. Said she was local. Real sharp. The kind that looks through you. Not at you. Quiet fire. Kinda like... Miguel trailed off. Never mind, he finished. Jack didn't correct him. That night, Jack sat on the porch. Wind moved through the trees like a hush. Sophie slept inside, arms flung over her stuffed rabbit. He opened the tin and pulled out the note she'd left before leaving. I wanted to matter to something that didn't have a price. He read it slowly, aloud, as though testing its weight in the open air. The next day, he drove to the edge of town where the new site had broken ground. Chain-link fencing lined the perimeter, but through it he saw workers in hard hats, someone measuring a trench, the faint star of foundation markers. He didn't expect to see her, but there she was, standing just beyond the temporary trailer. Clipboard under one arm, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She wasn't wearing the same wool coat. This one was newer, sleeker, but her hair still moved the same when the wind pushed from behind. He watched her talk to someone, nod once, step back, gesture toward the open space with a kind of vision Jack couldn't see, but could feel. A person who believed something better was coming. He didn't get out of the truck. He just watched. The next day, she came back, not to the house, but to the curb. Jack found her standing there around dusk, arms crossed lightly, eyes lifted toward the porch light. He opened the door before she knocked. You're not wearing your slippers, he said. She smiled gently. They're my bag. They stood like that for a moment, neither crossing the distance, neither needing to. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me, she said finally. I didn't want to see a stranger, he said, but I never did. She exhaled. Something about her face softened, like a storm finally drifting out to sea. I bought the block, she said, but I'm not keeping it. I'm building on it, giving it back. I saw the sign. You don't think it's too much? Jack shook his head. No, I think it's finally enough. They stood in silence. You want to come in? He asked. I don't want to stay where I'm not welcome. He tilted his head slightly. I never asked you to leave. Elle blinked once, as if that truth caught her off guard. I didn't know how to stay. Well, he said, stepping aside, I got a porch light, a half-burnt pie, and a girl who keeps drawing dogs we don't own. If that's not reason enough. She stepped forward. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Inside, Sophie ran into the room in socks, saw Elle, and lit up like spring had bloomed inside her. You came back. Elle knelt, arms open. I missed you. Sophie nodded solemnly. We saved your chair. They had tea. Jack didn't ask questions. Elle didn't offer plans. But something passed between them over that worn kitchen table. Not resolution, not promise, but beginning again. Later that evening, Elle stood beside the biscuit tin. She opened it gently, read a few notes Jack had written, smiled at one about the bird. Then, slowly, she added one of her own. You were never the safe place. You were the reason I wanted to build one. She closed the lid softly, then turned toward him and said, I'd like to stay, if it's all right. Jack didn't answer. He just crossed the room and set a clean mug beside hers. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the spoon Sophie planted weeks ago had stirred up just enough dirt to show the tip of something green. A start. The days lengthened. By late April, the light lingered in the sky even after Sophie had gone to sleep, spilling amber across the wooden floors and casting long, golden shadows up the staircase. The porch no longer moaned from the cold, and the frost that once sealed the windows like tape had given way to breath-fogged glass and the sound of wind chimes someone had hung on a hook by the door. Elle didn't stay as a guest anymore. She didn't have to. She folded laundry while Jack stirred soup. She read Sophie bedtime stories with voices and pauses that made the little girl giggle under her quilt. She bought fresh dishcloths, painted the loose window trim, left lists on the fridge but stopped folding them. They were no longer secrets, just small rituals of care written in her loose, careful hand. We're out of cinnamon. Also, your daughter now wants a goat. The mailman asked if we were married. I laughed. Then I didn't. You leave your socks in the laundry like you're trying to hide them. What do you think they've done? Jack never threw any of them away. The tin stayed on the fridge, but it had become a little crowded, and that was just fine. The town was changing too. The construction site down by the diner had grown bones. Steel beams, fresh cement, the smell of new lumber. Trucks came and went, but neighbors lingered at the fences. People asked questions now, not with suspicion, but with quiet hope. Jack heard whispers in the diner. Not judgment, just curiosity. Who is she? Where'd she come from? She's not like the others. And she wasn't. Elle met with council members in the morning and laid garden beds with Sophie in the evening. She didn't talk much about her past, not because she was hiding it anymore, but because it simply didn't live here, not in this version of her life. One Sunday morning, Jack found her sitting on the porch in his flannel again, legs tucked under her, sunlight warming her hair. She was sketching something, lines and trees, rooftops and fences. A park. He brought her coffee, sat beside her. What's that? She looked up at him with eyes that had learned to rest. A plan for the corner lot behind the school. He nodded. Looks nice. I want to feel like a place where time isn't a punishment. Jack didn't speak, just looked at the drawing again. I thought, maybe, benches for the older folks. A sandbox, if we can get enough grant money. Maybe a fence that doesn't look like a cage. He touched the edge of the paper. You thinking shelter? She tilted her head. What do you mean? You design places like someone who's been cold before. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers lingered on the coffee cup. Then she whispered, I've spent a lot of my life trying to prove I didn't need anyone. I thought if I made myself into something big enough, I'd never be small again. You're not small, Jack said. She looked at him. Neither are you. That evening, Sophie found a stray dog outside the fence, matted, hungry, one ear half bitten, but tail wagging like it had never known cruelty. Jack was halfway through telling her they couldn't keep it when Elle crouched down and scratched the dog gently under the chin. No collar, she said. Sophie beamed. Can we? Jack sighed. We don't have room. Elle smiled up at him. You said that about me, too. They named him Harold. Harold took to the porch, swaying like it had always been his. Sophie insisted he understood bedtime stories. Jack pretended not to notice how Elle let Harold sleep at the foot of her bed when she thought no one was looking. Sometimes healing wears a tail. Summer inched forward. By June, the town's air felt thick with dust and promise. Jack had taken on more hours at the diner, not because he needed the money. Elle had quietly paid off his old debts, but because he liked walking home past the growing willow commons and seeing life poured into it. He came home one night to find Elle asleep at the kitchen table, Sophie's sketchbook open beside her. The child had drawn a house again, this time with 4 windows, a tree house, a dog in the yard, and words in blocky letters. Our home. Jack stood there for a long moment, something aching and whole inside him all at once. He lifted Elle gently, carried her to bed. In the morning, she pretended she didn't know, but her smile told otherwise. They began eating dinners on the porch. plates balanced on knees, stories trading between bites. Sophie talked about school. Jack told stories about grease traps and Miguel's terrible singing. Elle mostly listened, nodding, laughing, sometimes just humming in the back of her throat like she was memorizing the moment. On the 4th of July, Jack bought sparklers from a roadside stand. They lit them in the yard, Sophie spinning wild patterns through the dark, while Harold barked at the sky. Elle stood beside Jack, her shoulder brushing his. "She's happy," she said softly. "She's always been light," he replied. "We just gave her a place to shine." Elle turned to him. "You did." He looked at her. "No, we did." The next morning, Elle handed him an envelope. Jack hesitated. She smiled soft. "Just read it." Inside was a letter, handwritten, careful. "I came here looking for land, for closure. I found neither. Instead, I found a girl who drew homes with crayons, a man who made silence safe, a dog with a broken ear. I don't want to keep building from loneliness. I want to build from love. If you'll have me." He folded it slowly, looked up at her. "You're already here," he said. Then, gently, he took her hand. They stood like that a long while, fingers interlaced, not for show, not for safety, but for what it meant. A choice. One night near the end of summer, the sky turned that particular shade of velvet just before stars emerge, and the world held its breath in the quiet pause between night sounds. Jack sat on the porch swing. Sophie curled beside him, her head on his chest. Harold snored at their feet. Elle joined them without a word. She leaned into his shoulder, watching the wind move through the trees. "You think it'll last?" she asked. Jack didn't answer right away. He just pulled the old tin from the side table and handed it to her. She opened it. Inside, every note she'd ever written, every one he'd added, a small mountain of paper, scribbled ink, folded corners. It smelled like coffee and cedar and something like home. She smiled, then tucked one more inside. "It's not about lasting forever. It's about being here. Now, together." Jack kissed the top of her head. And somewhere deep in the soil beneath the porch steps, where a child had once planted hope with a spoon, a wildflower finally bloomed. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from.